You open your eyes in your pitch black room covered in sweat. As you slow your breathing and get a grasp of your surroundings, you begin to calm down. It's all over now, whatever that was. Somehow it seems like a distant yet forbidden memory. You try to remember what you just experienced, and slowly these fantastical visions begin to form. Perhaps you were chased by a monster, or maybe someone in your life did the unthinkable. Maybe your worst fear was realized right in front of you. What happened isn't reality, but the feelings it caused were all real. What you've experienced is a common yet horrifying world that lies right within our mind. A nightmare. Google defines a nightmare as a frightening or unpleasant dream. For the most part, this is basically what a nightmare is. However, you'd be hard-pressed to explain to anyone that's had a vivid nightmare that none of it was real. Some even have a hard time forgiving people they know in real life that may have hurt them in a nightmare because it's so realistic. Really, I think that's why it's so horrifying. Even though it's not happening in reality, it doesn't matter. It's still going to affect you like it has. And it'll always have a chance of happening again any night you attempt to go to sleep. Even a nap can cause a nightmare as long as you begin to dream. One of the most underrated YouTubers in my opinion, Scrabble, made a phenomenal video on dreams, mainly on lucid dreaming. However, he did also partially delve into the more horrifying aspects of dreams, those being nightmarish visions and even real life effects that these dreams can have. I contacted him to ask about any further info on nightmares, and he sent me this. There is a way to intentionally invoke nightmares. You have to make sure that your room is really cold, and then you have to take a bunch of blankets and bury yourself under them, so that you start to sweat. Tried this once and the nightmare I got was pretty intense, so I didn't try it again. So if you want to intentionally cause a pretty intense nightmare, there you go. Nightmares are already bad enough, but surreal nightmares take it to the next level. Not only do you believe it really happened, but you also believe and are afraid of it happening in the real world. Imagine living through your worst fear and not being able to tell if it was real or not. It scares you so bad that you really don't even want to go back to sleep. In fact, you'd rather do anything else. But you'll have to eventually. You'll have to take the chance of facing it again, and that brings us to the next segment of this video. Unpredictability. Nightmares for the most part are completely unpredictable. Of course, as I mentioned before, there are methods to purposely trigger nightmares, but most of the time they happen completely unintentionally. Sometimes you can fall asleep, have a normal dream, wake up in the middle of the night, and then when you go back to sleep, experience a horrific nightmare. Other times it can be during a midday nap. The most common, of course, is a nightmare during the entire duration of sleep. But what about those times when the nightmare doesn't end after waking up? I'm of course talking about sleep paralysis. Taking a vivid nightmare a step further is more or less exactly what sleep paralysis does. Now you're in what you presume to be the real world, and yet something still isn't right. Maybe the sleep paralysis ends up being benign and you just experience an odd noise or a slight meaningless hallucination. But there's always the chance that it can be much worse than that. There are countless sleep paralysis stories on the internet. I'll read an extremely short one from the Reddit user Kahenley to give you a better idea on how a more horrifying case of sleep paralysis can feel. I've only experienced it 3 times, but my first time was the worst. I've never had any visual encounters, but when it happened the first time, I was laying on my left side and started to feel that pressure on my chest. When I realized I was paralyzed and started panicking, something whispered in my ear, "Just coming in to say goodnight." That's when I felt something was pushing me towards the edge of my bed. Terrifying stuff. That helpless and trapped feeling that sleep paralysis brings can often be much worse than most nightmares. The fact that you're presumably in the real world, maybe even face to face with a horrifying creature, and yet you can't do anything. You can't speak, you can't move, and unlike in a dream where you have control, you can't mentally change what's going on. You just have to suffer until it's over. And in a dream state, that can be a very long time. The distortion of time, in my opinion, is always a horrifying concept. A perfect example of this in a nightmare sense is the manga Long Dream by Junji Ito. In this story, for those who don't know, a man is admitted into a hospital or perhaps a mental institution because of his increasingly poor health. At first, it just seems like he may have a normal disease, however, this is quickly ruled out. Even though he's sleeping the same amount as anyone else, in his dreamscape he's experiencing 10, 50, 100, 500, 1,000 years of time. And these aren't just fun times either for the most part. Most of these are nightmares. To me, this is one of the most horrifying things about the dreamscape. You can sleep for only 8 hours, but experience weeks in nightmare time. Of course, unlike the manga, no matter how long you feel like you were in that nightmare, you won't age that amount in real life. Regardless of that though, I can only imagine what it would be like to be trapped in a vivid nightmare for what feels like years. And what if something happens in your brain and you have a seemingly infinite dream? An incalculable amount of time in the nightmarish world your mind is made up, and yet you've only slept a few hours. It's one of the most horrifying things one can experience, in my opinion. All in all, nightmares are thankfully not reality regardless of how horrible they can be. Regardless of the sleep paralysis demon or the terrible monster haunting your dreams, once you wake up and are able to get out of bed, it's over. And I guess that's really all we can take comfort in. With that being said, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and if you have a topic you'd like me to cover, comment it below. You can also follow me on Twitter, linked in the description. Have a good day, and I'll see you in whatever I make next.